everyone, Serena here. Thanks for joining me on my YouTube channel today. Fall is my favorite time of year, so let's go down the road and see what we can find to paint today in fall leaves. Alright, so we're back in the studio, and this is what I'm going to paint using some of the colors of fall. Now later on I'll show you a trick to make your foliage really pop out, but I'm going to use this as this little section here, which I've pre-drawn, and I'm using it basically for the leaf shape and for the color reference. This is Union Square brand. Got this from Jerry's Artorama. It's 11 by 14 hot press, 140 pound acid-free watercolor paper. It's not cotton, but we'll see how it works. And I've penciled these in with a watercolor pencil. I use the Super Color from Caran d'Ache. At least that way, if you're painting over it, you'll get a little bit of the line, but you won't get that heavy line that you get with graphite. And I'm also using my Turner Artist watercolors here. I'll be using Permanent Scarlet, Permanent Gamboge, Yellow Ochre, Burnt Umber, and maybe a little Phthalo Blue if needed. So I've pre-mixed those. So let's hop right in. I'm going to take quite a fine brush here to start because I want to get in the edges a little bit there. And I think I'm going to tackle that big one first. Let's go for the most difficult one, why not? Alright, and I think I'm going to have a little trouble because that's going to dry out pretty quick. And I want to keep that a little bit wet as I go along. So let me go ahead and use a bigger brush then. That will be, like they said in Jaws, I think we need a bigger boat. I think we need a bigger brush. Get that going. And I want to get this whole thing coated here. It really helps to have the lines drawn, I'm telling you that. So if you've got to cheat at all, do that. Do that. No one's going to know. Oh, I want to get the points in there. You can always refine it later, but I want to get this kind of wet and keep it wet so I can blend in a little bit of the orange. Now, you know, as you're looking through these references that you take, or if you're painting out in the open using a live reference, you'll notice that especially by the fall, your leaves aren't going to be perfect. There's going to be little bug holes and all kinds of things wrong with them. So you're not going to get a perfect leaf. Don't try to paint one. It looks more natural that way. And already I'm drying out a little bit, and I really don't want to do that. I'm trying to move as fast as I can. Now I'm getting a little sloppy here. But I want to keep that other side a little wet because there's more. Oh, it's drying a little bit. Don't let it get dry. There's more nuance to the color in the fall. You'll see instead of a flat green leaf that you get in the spring, you see all these little shades of color, and it really is nice. It gives you a nice variety of color in your painting. Alright, now I want to get some orange in there because if you look, you can see that it's quite orange around the edges here. So let's do that. Get a little bit of that orange in there while it's still wet and get it to blend in. See how nice that's going to look. And it'll look quite natural if you've kept the water, if you've kept the surface kind of wet. If you let it dry out a little bit, like it started to do here, you kind of get that cauliflower look, and I'm trying to avoid that. But if I can drag some of that over, work pretty quickly. This one looks like it might be dry. I don't want to really make it look really odd. But, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's nature. and nature isn't perfect. You just want to go for that impression of what a leaf is going to look like in the fall. You know, those bright colors, but you also have the subtle colors too. And when you're using a reference like this, a photograph, or even out in the open, use it as a reference. It doesn't have to be literal. You don't have to get every exact corner and blotch in there the way it looks in nature. So don't stress out. This is supposed to be fun. Have fun with it. See, I'm probably overworking this part too much, but I want to get some of that nice deep, that nice deep color in there. I love working with the oranges, plus it gives me a chance to use some of the oranges in my palette, which I don't use very much otherwise. There, I'm overworking it there. Time to stop. Time to behave a little bit. Okay, let me spread that out a little bit so it doesn't quite look so sharp. Alright, I'm going to leave that alone because I'm in danger of overworking it, and I'll move on to the next. And I'm basically going to use the same, maybe a little bit more. If you look at the reference, this leaf is a little bit more orange than that, a little bit more dark, a little darker. So I'll put a little bit more in there. Of course, that means when I get to my true orange color, it's not going to stand out as much. It'll look almost the same as the rest of the leaf. But it's fortunate that this first leaf is the largest one, because then it stands out a little bit more. It's almost like your focal point. I'm just going to fill this in kind of quickly if I can. It's a little easier here. And I'm using, I like this brush, I'm using a Jackson Studio Synthetic number 4. So I'm missing some of the spots here, but that's okay. Again, it's not science, it's art. I like this brush. I've been waiting to get some small brushes, even smaller than this, for some fine detail. And I've finally gotten some, and oh, it makes the difference. Makes the difference when you're trying to fill in all these areas and get that detail in there. Alright, let me see if I've kept that wet enough. Hopefully I have. Oh, maybe not. I'm just about the point where I can get it a little wet again and not have to worry that I'm overworking it. Oh, these are drying up too. I can get those little pointy details in while I'm doing this. But let me get some of that darker scarlet in the edges, in the very edges there. Kind of do that again. I probably should have taped this down. As you can see, it's buckling just a little bit. Oh, that's drying out, so I don't want a really sharp line there. Mix it with that. Even if I make it a little too dark. Whoops, that's a little too dark. Pull some of that over here. Oh, I'm overworking that part. But you see, as you go along, sometimes it works out well. I'm going to put a little points on there, like there should be, on those leaves. And that way it looks a little more natural. Okay. Now let's go on to the third one. I think I like, even though it shows on the reference that that's a little bit dark there, I think I like the lighter color with more of that yellow in it. So I'm going to work with that a little bit. See if I can mix up another color here that's got some of that dark in, but not completely orange. I'll let these dry in the meantime. Alright, let's get this one going. Let's see how that looks. That's going to be quite orange. Well, it's got that yellow in it too. Maybe I can work this one a little quicker than the others. Keep that section wet. Keep going here. Sometimes if you put too much water on your brush, you wind up having a disaster there. And you can't get the detail on the edges. You can't get it to flow quite to the ends like you want it to. But you can play with that a little bit later on. While that's wet, here comes the orange edging. That looks so nice. Get that in there in some of those areas. It really gives a nice depth to it. And you can play with these colors quite a bit. You know, when you're looking with a reference, you don't have to use the exact colors. Just kind of play with it. Or even draw a couple of them a little bit different. Put some more brown in there rather than orange. And I'm not even following the leaf shape quite as I should, but it just comes out looking very nice that way when they blend, when it's a wet and wet technique. So I'm going to let this dry for a little bit, and then I'll start working on the stems there. Alright, so I've waited a little while for that to dry. Now I'm going to put in some of the detail. You'll see, whoops, you'll see that there are veins showing up as inside the leaves, and that gives it a little more realistic look. So I've already mixed the color here I want to use. Made it a little bit darker of a brown than the leaf itself. And the trick is just to kind of follow that through. Whoops, I have maybe a little too heavy a brush here. That needs a little lighter of a brush, a little thinner of a brush. Okay. Maybe that worked out well though, because I've got, see, you just want to give a hint. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just give a little hint that you've got something there, some structure to the leaf. Maybe if I used a different curve to that, it would look a little better. Kind of trying to do it sideways, and that's not working too well for me, but just for demonstration purposes. Okay, see, that looks a little better there. Now I'm going to take some of this and follow it down. This is a little bit of a stem here, and follow that down. It almost goes a little lighter there, so I don't want to make it too dark. Oh, that's a little bit dark, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's a representation. Art is a representation. It's not a photograph. Put that in there. Blend that in a little bit so it doesn't look too harsh right there. A little shade there. Okay. There. If you want, you can actually kind of make that a little bit more obvious. Yeah, so it looks a little more natural. Alright, and those are the leaves of fall. Alright, so now I'm going to demonstrate a technique that easily lends a lot of brilliance to your foliage. And I'm going to just cover this up so that we don't harm that, but we're going to be using Frisket for this demonstration. Now, I've never used it before, so we'll try it together, but I got a hold of some Grumbacher Misket, which is a liquid frisket, okay, watercolor liquid frisket, and it's basically a latex mask that you can paint onto areas of your watercolors where you don't want the paint to go. So it's going to cover it over, and you can paint the background. You just brush it on through without worrying about going around all the little details that would be really time consuming. Now, it can be white or tinted. I got the tinted kind because I really do want to see where it is on the paper. I don't know how people use the white kind, but they do. And keep in mind, it can be hard to remove. So it's best to test on some paper first before you use it on your masterpiece. You want to let it dry, use it, and remove it as soon as you are finished with it. The same with your brush. The minute you're finished using it, painting it on, you want to clean your brush. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up and paint these two samples with the Misket that I got, and we'll come back to show the demonstration of how you can add that brilliance to your foliage. Alright, so I applied the Frisket to the sections here. I just have this one covered so I don't get paint on it. But I used a Creative Mark masking fluid brush. Now you don't have to use a masking fluid brush. I just used it because they were inexpensive. I got a whole package of them, and I keep them separate that way. It's easy for me to keep them separate. I'll only use these for masking fluid. Now, I did wash the brush right away, and I don't think there's any latex left in it. I used a technique or a little trick that I read in a book about loading your brush with soap first. So you get it a little wet, you put it on the bar of soap and get a little soap, and then I wiped it off, and then I dipped it in the masking fluid and used it. But it is quite dry now. It's a little tacky because it's latex, so it feels tacky, but it's not really. So what we'll do now is try to get this a little wet. I'll get it a little wet around here. Oops, I can feel it gripping the brush a little bit. So I'm going to get it a little wet just in the area here. And you go right over the latex. What you're seeing there is a little color coming off from the watercolor pencil that I used, which I guess I shouldn't have used. But now I'm going to add some of the color for the background and just kind of blend that in different areas where I want the background. So if you have fall foliage, you are going to have bits of red and pink and purples and browns all in your backgrounds, because all the leaves are changing at once. So I'm just going to color in all of these with some different colors here, just to make it look a little bit natural as a background. And then I'm going to, you see how it's beating up on the latex, and hopefully I did a good job covering it with the latex. But we're going to see here how that will look in a little while. I'm going to get some more dark color there. Okay, now we're going to leave that alone, and I'm going to go over to this side and do the same thing over here. Go ahead and give that a good wash over. And again, I learned my lesson about using a watercolor pencil on this. I won't do that again. But this is how you learn. And on this section, I'm going to use some greens. Some greens in there. Get those done. And sometimes you do have like a pine tree in the back, and that was my inspiration for this section, because I did take a couple pictures the other day when it was nice and sunny with pine trees in the background. And there were a few pine trees, a few branches, and it was quite dark in one section. So I'm going to go and add that in. Might not look very realistic. It kind of looks pretty though. These two. And what I'll do is let these dry. Just going to let these dry, and we'll come back to this and we'll see what the big deal is about Frisket. Alright, so we're back, and what I want to do now is to gently rub off the Frisket. It feels sticky because it's a latex, but let's see how that works. It should rub off pretty clear. You don't want to let it get wet, because you use it as a guideline, because it's going to pick that right up and dissolve it into your painting. So if you don't want the colors of your watercolor pencil showing up in there, you can't do that. Oh, it came up quite cleanly. Now the leaves I was looking at are actually really bright yellow. So I'm going to go ahead and paint them in here bright yellow. Once I do this, I'm going to go to the other side, because I have the same plant that I'm going to paint over here. And the same color yellow. Get it a little stronger there because it seems to be fading out on me. Okay, so I've got that done. Now I want to add just a little bit of brown to this. What I'm going to do here is show you the difference between the two now. Okay, we have a light, very light, the same color leaf, but you see here the use of contrasting colors, and it really stands out when it's on a darker background. Now, I use similar colors for this and completely different colors for that, so it's a color thing too. You can use your contrast, especially with fall foliage. If you have orange trees, the leaves of the trees against a blue background or sky. Use your contrast to convey brilliance. Do you see how much brighter that looks than this? And sometimes you do want a subtle look, but this will really make your paintings more dramatic. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Do take a few seconds to comment, hit the like icon, and subscribe. See you next time.